This episode of Ouzo Talk is brought to you by Kingsford Smith Transport. Have a group that needs transporting? KST has you covered with their fleet of professionally maintained buses and coaches, catering from 9 to 57 passengers and driven by experienced drivers. Visit kstbuses.com.au to talk to the team and make your booking. Kingsford Smith Transport, proud sponsors of the Ouzo Talk podcast. There's no Ouzo Talk without a bottle of Ouzo, which is why we love the Greek Providor. Get a real taste of the very best produce that Greece has to offer. From olive oils and delicious artisan sweets, to unique spirits, earthy herbs and memorable wines. Visit thegreekprovidor.com.au to see their amazing range. The Greek Providor, proud sponsors of the Ouzo Talk podcast.
Sound is.
Nick, we've had some eerily similar experiences the last few weeks to do with your parents and my grandparents, right?
We have, mate. We have. I couldn't believe what you told me today, but I think you better share it with the audience.
Well, look, just to recap, I mean, just a few weeks ago, you were saying how your mum asked you to take out a fridge, and guess what? I was asked to do the same today for my grandparents. I was having flashbacks thinking, far out, what's going on here?
I've heard this before.
Yeah. I'm like, are you guys serious? They're like, yeah, the fridge gone, kaput.
Mate, it's a Greek thing, honestly. Council pickup was coming.
Yeah.
That's what Greeks do. Check out the old fridge.
Well, no, this was a special request. This wasn't a council pickup job. This was, we're putting it out there and we had to, they had to call the council to come and pick it up. So yeah, we got roped into doing that today. But, it doesn't stop there, though. We had another incident.
What a classic. It was, red alert at my house.
Yeah.
Got the phone from my mum. Something's up. Quick, you got to come over. Emergency. Dinner, mum. Her bloody MySat box, where she listens to all the Greek shows, was disabled. Couldn't work. So she hadn't been listening to Greek shows for a week. Yeah. What a disaster.
No. Well,
you had the same thing.
Well, yeah. While I was there tending to the fridge, they started mentioning the MySat as well. My yaya's really upset. She's like, "Oh, πάνε όλα τα κανάλια. I can't watch TV. Και τι θα γίνει? Ήρθε ο αδερφός σου. He couldn't fix it. This, that, and the other." And I'm like, hang on a second. Let me call Nick 1 second. It might be the same problem. And lo and behold, exactly the same thing.
Classic. That was so funny. You know what the funny thing is? My mum has told everyone now. So I'm getting calls now from, not my aunties, my cousins.
Yeah.
So they're telling their kids, telephone to Nick or ring Nick.
Yeah, Nick knows everything.
He knows how to fix it. So maybe we should do a community announcement.
Public service announcement, just call MySat. Don't go to the Greek section. Call, pick one of the other options.
Option 4, yeah. So definitely option 3 was for Greeks, and you're on hold and never answer it. Go to option 4 and tell them you need to get it fixed, and they'll give you some formula to press. So
there you go. Don't panic.
Don't panic. It'll get fixed, and you don't have to take your box to Burwood, which originally was my request.
Yeah. Well, I think we're going to have to, because their one is pretty old. Like, they've had it for years, so I don't think I'm going to... I'm going to go to Burwood.
So good luck to all those Greek Australians out there who've got that MySat box.
You're welcome. Anyway, okay, look, enough of that. Look, I mean, let me ask you a question. Would you consider yourself to be religious?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah.
You do go to church, don't you?
Yeah, but you don't have to go to church to be religious.
Sure,
I'd say.
Of course.
But look, it's part of our culture. So if you call that being religious, I guess probably. Yeah. What about yourself?
Yeah. To some extent, like most Christians, struggle with our own faith at at certain points.
I know what you mean though, because we are logical thinkers and we do like to question everything, and sometimes we don't have those answers. But we have a great person in the room that can answer some of those for us today, hopefully.
We do. And look, obviously, we're going to be talking about the Greeks and Christianity today, and the Bible, obviously. And to do that, as always, we've enlisted the help of an expert, because us buffheads just couldn't do it justice, could we?
No, we tried, but no, we bring in the big guns.
Although we have had some pretty good discussions about this topic in the past, haven't we?
We've been trying to do this episode for how long? At least,
a year?
A year?
6
Probably
months,
a year,
something like that, yeah.
It's been a while, but I'm just glad we finally got someone that can assist us with it.
So our guest today teaches Islamic studies at Western Sydney University, ancient Greek religion and myth at the University of New South Wales as well. He holds a PhD in the sociology of religion from Pandion University of Social and Political Sciences, Athens in Greece, and a PhD in studies in religion from the University of Sydney. He has been teaching at a number of universities, both in Australia and overseas, since 2002. His specialization is in the political phenomenology of early Christianity, patristics, Byzantine philosophy, the history of religions, and Indigenous Australian studies. He's authored and co-edited more than 10 books as well. Joining us in the studio today, Vassilis Adrahtas. Welcome to Ouzo Talk.
Welcome.
Nice to be here with you guys. Yeah, I mean, you read the bio. It sounds very, big words and, fancy stuff there. Yeah.
Well,
actually,
it is pretty fancy.
Yeah. It's for those who, are not technically involved, in those sort of discipline, it sounds a bit, like a UFO thing, UFO. Yeah.
True. Well, I got to say as well, for those who can't see Vassili, you'd be forgiven for thinking that he might be a priest because of your beard.
Okay, yeah.
Is this a conscious choice?
I suppose, in a way, yeah. But I think it's more subconscious.
Right.
Subconscious, because I really wanted to become a priest,
Sure.
for a long period in my life, but it never materialized. So I suppose that's my reaction, my appearance.
Wow. I tell you what, most of my family, they see my beard and, they start, the questions inevitably start.
Yeah.
Why not?
It's a very Greek thing, yeah.
It is, isn't it? Well, we're very glad to have you with us. Nick, shall we do the honours?
Yes, we shall. Let's have a drink.
Yamas.
Cheers.
Cheers. Welcome, Vassili. Now, we had a sip of this before we went on air, and this one is courtesy of the Greek Providor as well, isn't it, Nick?
It is. Well done, Greek Providor. They've come with the goods again. I don't think we've tried this one. This
we haven't.
A tsikoudia from Crete, and it's by the same company that did the Ouzo that we had a couple of episodes ago.
Yeah, right.
35N, which I just found out stands for the latitude that goes through Crete.
There you go.
So that's why they've named it 35N.
We've learnt something.
So what do you think of that?
It's good stuff.
I really like that.
Oh.
You know what's interesting about this one? It smells a lot more potent than it goes down. I feel as though this one could be potentially dangerous because you could be sitting there drinking.
Yeah.
You have one too many.
Yeah, we did. We
And
had a
then go
big
to-
whiff of it. What is this?
Yeah.
But then we had it. Oh, it went down nice.
Let's see how we go towards the end of the episode. How far
Definitely.
through the bottle.
Well, there's a hint of Shiraz in it as well. That's probably what it gives it that smell. So, but it's only 38% alcohol, so it's quite light I think,
Okay.
for a tsikoudia.
Well, leave it to the Cretans to come up with the with the stronger stuff, but this one's actually really palatable. It's really good. I like it.
And what I like even better, it was actually three mates from Crete that got together and they created this distillery, 35N.
There you go.
So good on you, boys.
Bravo, Pedia.
Yeah,
Good
well
job.
done. Well done, Team Crete.
Fantastic. And thank you to the Greek Providor again for providing the drinks for us this season. Very much appreciated. Thank you to Crystal. Amazing work as always.
It is fantastic. You're the best.
Okay, let's get into the meat of it, Vassili. What's your background from Greece?
Look, basically, I was born in Australia, so I'm a Bankstown boy.
Bankstown.
Yeah, well, my parents were here as migrants of the 60s. They eventually returned to Greece. They made it back, and they stayed there, and that's where I grew up with my siblings.
Right.
So I'm Australian born, but not Australian bred.
With an accent.
Yeah, with an accent there.
Australian born, Greek raised.
Yeah, Greek raised. So I've been, for a big part of my life, growing up in Athens. That's where I studied,
What area?
Brahami, yeah, which is, Agios Dimitrios. Most
Ah,
people
right,
know
yeah.
it as Agios Dimitrios, but the natives know it as Brahami,
Okay.
which is, the Turkish term for the region. So, yeah, I grew up in Athens. I studied there. My first degree is in Orthodox theology. And then I continued my studies in world religions.
Right.
History of religions. I came to Australia. I did Aboriginal studies on religion, and basically my whole life I have been studying religion from different perspectives,
Okay, that's fascinating.
like
Man,
sociology, philosophy, anthropology, psychology, history, trying to be as holistic as possible.
So what is it that drew you to that? Obviously, you've got a real affinity for the religious and the spiritual. Why? What's drawn you to it?
Look, that has been a very big question for me. I have reached eventually an answer.
Okay.
And I think it has been a kind of vacuum created within me. Because, as I said, I was born in Australia. And when we left, I was 7, 8 years old. It was like an uprooting for me going to Greece at that age. I didn't really understand what was happening to me. That dislocation created a vacuum within me. You can look at this as a psychoanalyst, but basically I was always trying to fill in that vacuum that had been created. Αυτή η τρύπα, δημιουργήθηκε μια μαύρη τρύπα, black hole. Wow. Anything that has to do with religion is really powerful in many respects. So if you're going to really go for something to fill in a vacuum, you're going most likely to look for something really potent, really strong. And that's why I think I turned to religion. Of course, there have been people, throughout my life, like important figures, religious figures, that really inspired me. Paradoxically, and I really want to stress this, I have never had negative experiences within the church with people.
Right.
Really?
You might come across, and it's very common, not even, especially for Greeks, that in the church, I had this experience with this papa, the other papa, I never had negative experiences with papades. I suppose I was lucky, and I really came across some very inspiring figures. So the need to fill in this black hole within me, and the lack of having, really good, inspiring people around me, led me into religion. And then it's basically the thing itself. When you start learning and exploring, you become more hungry, and you want to know more and more and more. And at the end of the day, religion never ends. The God question, or the sacred question is always open. So I sort of have conceptualized that way.
It really is the ultimate question of why, isn't it? Or
The big question, the $1 million dollar question.
Do you have any ancestors that were part of the church at all that you could relate to? Was it?
Not really.
Wow.
My family was a normal, average Greek family, not very religious, conventionally, let's say, religious. We didn't have in the family someone who really was into this kind of stuff.
Right.
Not really.
And where were your parents from?
My father was from Nafpaktos.
Nafpaktos.
And my mother from Patra.
And your grandparents from those regions as well?
How
far back do you go?
Oh, the name Adrahtas goes back to the 15th century.
Really?
I've located a nobleman in the court of Palaiologos, the emperor, the Byzantine emperor, in the 14th century, end of 14th century, early 15th century in Constantinople.
Wow.
And it seems that those Adrahtas, just before the fall or after the fall of Constantinople, left, as many Greeks did, noblemen did, and they went to Peloponnesus.
Right.
And most likely they went to Laconia. So because Laconia has Adrahtas, and then from there they started, dispersing and, going all over the place. So nowadays they are in Laconia, Messinia, Nafpaktia, and Volos. That sort of name, but it goes back to the 14th century.
Wow,
amazing.
And does it mean anything?
Adrahtas means a person who most likely manufactures or sells adrachtia. The adrachti is the spinning part of a process where you make wool into string. So you need this adrachti, this spinning thing. So it was very important in those days, in the medieval period.
Wow.
Yeah.
You've got history, Nick, with priests in your family, don't you?
We do, actually. Yeah, my great-great-great-grandfather, he was a priest in the Suli village that I keep on talking about. And there was a rumor or a myth or a story that came out of it that he met Cosma. So he met this little short guy walking through the mountains, and he wanted to go to the ocean. So he took him down the mountain, down the path, and he took him to the coastline. And the story goes that he put his cloth on the water, and then he skidded across the water.
There you go.
You're talking about Saint Cosmas Diatolos?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that was the story. So my great-great-great-grandfather, we're talking I don't know, probably 1700s, 1800s, around there somewhere.
Yeah. But it's a good link to probably what we're going to talk about, because Saint Cosmas has been a very, very cardinal figure in the connection between Hellenism and Christianity.
Really?
Yeah, immense.
Wow.
Perhaps, they wouldn't be speaking Greek, in half of Greece without Cosmas.
Now, this is the individual that we were talking about the other episode with Panayoti, who was famed for saying to build schools, wasn't it? Yeah. This is
he built around probably 200 schools. In less than 20 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Imagine.
Unbelievable.
Crazy.
And that's a whole other thing as well. The stories of potential miracles and things like that. I mean, I think we've probably all heard stories like that, and we've probably each got individual stories to tell as well, which I hope we'll get to during this episode. But it's going to be great. Let's move it on, though. I mean, from a very high level, Vassili, what's Greece's connection to Christianity in the Bible? Are there particular people, regions, or landmarks in Greece that hold significant importance in Christianity, history, or theology, going right back to the beginning of Christianity?
Look, that's a big question. We have to break it down, I suppose.
Yeah.
Well,
can we say, let's talk about the Bible. So we've got the Old Testament and the New Testament.
Yeah.
Maybe just give us a quick rundown, because we know the Bible, it's a Greek word.
Yeah. It's a Biblos. Biblos is a Bible.
Ta Biblia? Is that what it
Biblos,
is?
Biblos simply means book.
Okay.
The book.
Because I read an article the other day, it was the Bible's named after the word, two words, ta Biblia, the books.
Yeah.
Is that any truth to that, or is it just named after the book?
It's the book. I mean, if there is a book that deserves the name of a book, that's
that
the book,
one.
because that, to be honest, was the first book.
Okay.
The Christians, something that you might not know, is that they can be called, the Christians, especially the Christians, can be called the people of the book, especially the Christians. We normally have this designation for Jews, Christians, and Muslims, but in a general sense, in a very technical sense, the first people who made the so-called codices, they put together the pages and they sewed them together, and they made something that looked like our modern book with the Christians.
Wow.
All right.
So in a very technical sense, Christians were the first people of the book. But yeah, it's the book. So the Greek word, is there already. Yeah. But the connection is that...
So we've got the Old Testament and the New Testament. So
Yeah.
Old Testament is before Jesus was born.
These are designations Christians use, Old Testament and New Testament. The Old Testament has includes all those writings that the Christians, in a way, inherited from the Jewish part of their prehistory. Now, the Israelites or Jews afterwards didn't call it, of course, and they don't call it Old Testament. For them, it's, the Tanakh. It's the three parts.
The Torah, isn't it?
The three parts. The Torah, which is the law, the prophets, and the sociological wisdom literature, some, let's call it very educational sort of stuff around, living properly and blah, blah.
The Old Testament in Greek, we would designate that as being the Septuagint.
The Septuagint is a translation, the Greek translation of the law and the prophets.
Right, okay.
Yeah, so in the 3rd century, the Jews of Egypt, especially Alexandria, were already, let's say, alienated from their linguistic background. They didn't understand Hebrew.
Right.
So they embarked on, a translation of their scriptures for liturgical use, so they could understand, the new generations could understand the scriptures. So it's the Jews themselves of Alexandria that translate their own scriptures, basically the law and the prophets, into Greek, which is their lingua franca, the international language at the time.
Wow.
So that's the first, let's say, connection. But there are other connections as well. For instance, there is a mentioning of the Greek Empire, the empire of the Macedonians. The Alexander's empire within the book of Daniel, Prophet Daniel.
Right. So Alexander the Great's mentioned in the Bible.
Yeah, the empire of Alexander the Great, is mentioned, in the book of Daniel, the prophetic book of Daniel. It's one of the empires that are mentioned there. We have the Romans, they have the Macedonians, which are the Greek Macedonians, because sometimes we lose perspective of what we're talking about. We have the Persians, the Assyrians. So there is a succession of empires which lead in a descending order to the last days. So within this descending order, the Greeks, the empire of the Greeks, is mentioned there in the person of Alexander.
Wow. Just want to backtrack just a little bit. The Old Testament, there was it 37 books?
It's 49.
49.
49. In the Roman Catholic Church, for instance, it's less. It's 39. The same in the Western Christian churches, Protestant churches, or even the Jewish communities. But for the Orthodox, the Old Testament comprises 49 books.
Okay, and how many of those are in the Bible now?
49.
49.
They comprise the Old Testament for the Greeks, not only for the Greeks, for all Orthodox.
Okay, so there's a different Bible then.
There is a different Bible. The Bible is not, the same for everyone. Yeah, for instance, you have 49 books plus 27, the New Testament, which makes them 76. But that's for the Orthodox Church. It's 10 less for Roman Catholics or Protestants.
What was there first? Which one was written first? Or which one was put together first?
The Old Testament, you mean?
Well, the first Bible, is there such a thing? Which one was put
Oh,
together?
no. The Bible comes into, let's say, existence very slowly. What is? It's the problem of what we call the problem of the canon. What is a Bible or not? There was no need for a canon. Why? The question one should ask is...
So canon is?
Canon is the rule that says that, the Bible has 76 books or 50 books or 40 books. How many books? And which books, are Christians to regard as the Bible, which is inspired, which is good for them, which is blah, blah.
Yeah.
Now, why would such a problem arise?
Yeah.
It arises only when between Christians or between the Jews, because the Jews have their own, canon for the Tanakh. So when, you have disagreements, when you say, look, we have this book, and this book says this, so why are you saying that we should believe that way? And then someone asks, stop, just give me a minute. Which book did you mention? Oh, it's the Apocalypse, Apocalypse of Mariam. Apocalypse of Mariam. I haven't heard of that.
Yeah.
We don't have that. Where did you come up with that? Oh, I mean, holy, Mary just gave it to the church herself, before dying. Are you for real? How don't we know about it? So
is that true?
No, it's not.
Oh,
I mean, that's how things, start, becoming very heated and debated. When you say that you have a book from this apostle or from Virgin Mary, and then the other, or Mary Magdalene, for instance, and then the others come and say, well, we haven't heard of this. So come on, let's be serious now. Let's sit down and let's put things, properly, and let's see which books are really genuine, authentic, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And that's how the first canon comes into existence. The first canon for the New Testament appeared in the middle 2nd century AD.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the famous Muratori canon. Due to the
Because the Bible was compiled. I mean, it was compiled by committee, really. At the end of the day, wasn't it?
Great question.
There hasn't been really a committee that compiled the Bible in the Orthodox Church.
Really?
In the Orthodox Church, we don't have a committee or a synod that has really stipulated which books belong to the Bible. We have, though, great fathers and teachers of the church who have, included these books or have left out other books. So gradually...
So who made the call? Who actually said... So if there's no committee, was it individuals?
Individuals, yeah. For instance, St. Athanasius in the 4th century has...
Good name.
Yeah, has perhaps the first, most authoritative, let's say, catalogue of the books that comprise the Bible we have today. Sometimes, certain fathers have books that we don't have today, for instance, that they regarded as being part of the Bible. To give you an example, we have a book called the Epistle of Barnabas, the Greek Cypriot know Barnabas very well. But that epistle, or very important text, eventually was not included into the Bible. So it's something that, sort of materializes, takes shape slowly, gradually, and eventually it's there. Habitually, it develops. In the Western Church, there are synods, that said that these are the texts, these are the books. In the Protestant churches, this became very, very much of an issue because the Protestants have this sort of very cardinal belief, which is sola scriptura, only the Bible, only the scriptures. So if your faith depends so much on only the Bible sort of belief, then the first thing you should do is define the Bible. But in the Orthodox Church, Scripture is very important, but it hasn't been, let's say, exclusive. It hasn't monopolized the faith. We have tradition as well. The letter writing hasn't, become the only means of God's revelation. We have iconography, we have the liturgy, we have many things in the Orthodox Church,
Yes.
and it was always more holistic. But for the Protestants, in the 15th century, it was the letter, the word, the page, the book. So it was a great need there to define the Bible. So
Right.
many Orthodox have the sort of wrong impression that, for instance, the First Ecumenical Council, declared what is the Bible and which books belong to the Bible. All that Constantine, said the Bible is from now on. The Bible is going to be this, but nothing can be further than the truth.
Okay.
Right. Interesting.
Very interesting. So you mentioned the Catholics have 10 book less.
Yes.
The Orthodox one was between 200, 300 AD, I think you said. It came into fruition. Was it the same Bible then? Because Catholics and Greeks, Orthodox were the same religion at that stage.
Yes. It was one church.
And was it one Bible at that time?
Yeah. But don't think of the Bible. Don't think of the Bible as it was. It's. We think it now retrospectively. We project what we have nowadays in our hands as a book, as a physical entity, and we think that it was always like that.
Yep.
Which was not. I mean.
Okay.
In 1,000 years ago or 1,500 years ago, what was the Bible? The Bible was what you heard in the church.
Yes.
What the priest was holding in his hands, and he was opening, and he was reading, from the Apostolos or from the Gospel or other readings. It's the Bible is the readings you hear in the church. So there's not one physical book, like the one we have today, and it's very accessible to anyone. So that's not there. Simply, it's not there. Okay. What is there is a sort of reference, a point of reference, a symbolic point of reference, which is the scriptures in a very general sense. Now, the scriptures could be, these or those. They could be 40 or they could be 42. It depends where the church, which church you're talking to. Are you talking about the North African church? Are you talking about the church in Gaul or the church in Italy or the church, in Greece or in Anatolia? Which church are you referring to? So there was a difference, and it didn't really matter. It started to become a real big issue when you would raise a question of faith and invoke a certain text. So when you say, for instance, I'll just give an example, that Christ cannot be God, because in this book it says that he's the first of the creatures, the created beings.
So this was the argument at the Council of Nicaea.
Yeah. But then you see, okay, which book is this?
Sadis after.
Which book?
Very
Okay,
impressed.
which book is this? Where did you come up with this? When you, for instance, mention the pre-existence of souls, and you come up with books, and there are Christian books, that talk about the pre-existence of souls.
Yep.
We have the so-called Gnostic literature, and then the question is, are these books authentic? Who wrote them? How are you in hold of them? Why don't we have them? How did they come to you? So the questions of the day and the debates and the need for unity, especially within an empire, to a great extent shaped what we know as the Bible. That's why many fathers said, for instance, look, the fact that we haven't got certain books in the Bible doesn't mean that those books are bad necessarily. For instance, I'll give you an example. In our churches, our Orthodox churches, we have lots of iconography about the life of Virgin Mary. Now, where does that come from? Because our information from the Gospels and the New Testament is minimal. So we know that it comes from the Protevangelion of Jacob, a very, very specific apocryphon.
Right.
It's from the apocryphal literature, but apocrypha doesn't mean something obscure, something of the occult, something. You don't imagine something like that. It's just something that isn't well known. It's known to some, but not generally in the church. Now, the Protevangelio of Iacovu, speaking about, the parents of Virgin Mary, the early life of Virgin Mary, basically her whole life till her death, has nothing, bad in it. It's a very nice book. A bit fancy at some points, but yeah, I mean, it's not, hasn't got something heretical. That's why it inspired iconographers, and in a way, the church incorporated the book via art on the wall of this or that church, on the frescoes.
So would it be fair to say that to some degree, those apocryphal gospels or whatever you want to call it is, are providing context around what the canon is?
They are a witness to a broader tradition.
Right.
There are lots of those books which are books which have, the ideas go not just beyond the fanciful. They go into, something anti-Christian. They are preposterous.
Which would be heretic.
Heretic. But others are not. Ambiguous, neutral, or even, they could be described as edifying. For instance, I have studied especially one of those books, the so-called Gospel of Thomas.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a sayings gospel, a gospel that includes only sayings. That is apophthegmata. Like, for instance, the end of the world will come when... It might be, trendy as well. The end of the world will come when men become women and women become men.
Well, this is
make
topic.
That up, or is that in there?
No, that's in there.
That's in the book.
That's in the Gospel of Thomas.
Well, there you go.
So it's happening now.
No. I mean, what the real meaning of this saying is that when men and women become the same in spiritual terms, when they become equals, when they behave, and when we expect from them the same things, and not regard the one better or the one, So when they are interchangeable and there's no difference, then that's the end of the world. Now, the end of the world in Thomas is not some sort of apocalyptic end, destruction. It has different meaning. It's the consummation of the world. That's the good part of the world. So it's what is the saying? It's saying that the world is going to be perfect when women and men are the same.
Equality.
Okay.
But, it can be twisted, for instance.
Yeah, of course.
When you hear it nowadays, you can imagine, heaps of things.
And I suspect as well that the way that it's been translated from the original language would have a great deal to do with how it's interpreted.
Absolutely. But why did I mention that book, that Gospel of Thomas? Because with the,
it's probably the most cited one that isn't.
It's quite well known nowadays. Apart from 2 or 3 passages which are sort of ambiguous or vague, the rest of it any Christian can read and really, gain from it, benefit from it. There's no reason why they shouldn't.
Okay. I guess a lot of these texts, people can misinterpret that as well.
Oh, yeah. Of course. I mean, if you read, for instance, you remember some years ago the gospel according to Judas gospel, basically a small passage. There's lots of such gospels that were going around, and they were propagating and promoting certain ideologies or certain practices. So that's why the fathers of the church said, it's better, to play it safe. But of course, you always have to have in mind certain things, Today we are talking about 95% of literacy. People going to school, having education proper. 1,500 years ago or more, the levels of literacy or the levels of education were, quite low. We're talking about, max 20%. Which creates lots of problems. Are you equipped? Do you have some sort of background in order to understand properly a text? I mean, you haven't even gone to school.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not going to read it because you don't know how to read it. But if you hear it from some other person reading it, then you might be, sort of imagining things.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite complicated. It's quite complicated, and we tend to lose context.
Yeah.
Yes.
Context. Yeah.
Yeah.
We think of the Bible, to return to your question,
Yeah.
as if the Bible 1,000 years ago was what we call the Bible today. It's a different experience.
Yeah, okay.
A different experience. Nowadays, what's the Bible? The Bible is a book you buy from a bookstore, for $50. You can go home, open, and, read it all in, let's say, 1 week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then study it throughout your life. That sort of experience was simply out of the question 1,000 years ago. Okay? I was talking to my students, last week, because I'm the convener of Greek studies at UNSW, and we do Greek. And I was talking about them, about the Bible, because it's the first book, and it's a book in Greek. And I was telling them that, in order to buy a Bible in those days, a proper Bible, okay, let's say the whole Bible, you most likely would have to sell your house in Vaucluse.
Yeah.
The price of the Bible,
Yeah.
of a Bible like Old Testament and New Testament, the whole thing would be the price of a house in Vaucluse.
Yeah.
Because you would need some, several hundreds of sheep being slaughtered, so you get the skin and then, turn the skin into pages and then have the illustrators and the writers.
Yeah.
I mean, that was
Massive
a
process.
massive,
Yeah.
enterprise.
Yeah.
Who could do that? No one.
Yeah.
So a couple of things. So it was written in Greek.
Yep.
Second thing, were there any Greek Orthodox or any Greeks that wrote chapters or books in the Bible?
So the Old Testament was translated into Greek. Some parts of the Old Testament were written, small parts, originally in Greek. Now, the entire New Testament is written in Greek. Those 27 books are written into Greek.
Okay.
So all of them.
All of them.
Wow.
All of them. The first language of, let's say, we could use the term international, ecumenical, global Christianity was Greek.
Okay.
Wow.
So those 27 books, obviously we know who wrote them.
Yes, we know.
Well,
We know.
you know who.
Yeah. We know.
Tom probably don't.
They have come down to us with under certain names. Now,
Do we
because
know if any of them were Greek?
none of them was Greek.
Okay.
None of them. But some had Greek names.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So were they all Jewish that wrote them?
Now, Jews is a bit, again, you see, it's a bit
It's a very
misleading.
generic term.
It's a bit misleading. For instance, the disciples of Jesus, most of the disciples of Jesus were Galileans. Now, if you would say to a Galilean from Galilee that you are a Jew,
Yep.
he would kill you.
Oh, really?
Oh yeah, are you serious? I'm a Jew. I'm a Galilean. I'm not a Jew.
Oh, right.
Okay.
Different tribe.
I'm a son. They would say I'm a son of Israel. I'm an Israelite. They wouldn't say I'm a Jew.
Yeah.
Okay. I thought
That's
Jew
for
and
instance-
Israel was the same thing.
No. The Jew is something. The Jew is an emerging category. From the late first millennium BCE, and in the Christian era. So that's why, for instance, the gospel. Especially, for instance, the Gospel of John, according to John, you have, this sort of, negative wording against the Jews. And you wonder, isn't the person writing that a Jew? How is he talking like that against the Jews? But if you don't get the internal dialectics here and the tensions, you won't get it. It's like some Greeks saying that we are more Greeks than you.
Yeah.
It's like the Jews, which is the Israelites of Judea, were saying to all other Jews, which is Israelites all over what we nowadays know as Palestine, or nowadays Israel, you are not really Israelites. We are the Jews. So the Jew emerged as a sort of attempt to be an exclusive bearer of Jewish identity. So Matthew, Mark, John, Luke are not technically speaking Jews. Okay.
So the Galileans from Israel.
Some are Galileans, some are not. Luke, for instance, belongs to what we call the diaspora, the Hellenic diaspora, Hellenic Judaism.
Right.
Oh, right.
Yeah, that's why he has the most beautiful Greek, the Gospel of Luke. The others were from that region. Ioannis, the Gospel of John, Ioannis, is a Galilean. Now we have two disciples of Jesus, Andrew and Philip. They have Greek names. So amongst the 12, we have two disciples who have Greek names. We don't know them by any other names. So why am I saying this? Because it shows how much the Greek influence, language, culture had infiltrated and already in the first century influenced what we call Judaism in very broad terms. So there's lots of Greek already, in the Old Testament, and of course in the origins of Christianity. Yeah. Simply put, you cannot understand the origins of Christianity without Greek.
Yes.
Without Greek, it's impossible. That's why you have all these, Protestants, especially Protestants nowadays, going, to college or university to study Greek, to learn Greek, in order to read the Bible in the original language, or to understand the context, the historical context.
I just want to take it back real quick to the Old Testament. Are there any other instances where Greeks or, any of those sort of city-states are mentioned in the Old Testament? I mean, I was of the understanding that the Philistines, for example, may have been, that are mentioned in Judges, I think it is, with Samson and whatnot.
It's a theory.
That they were effectively the Minoan civilization.
The people of the sea. It's a theory.
Right.
It hasn't been proved. I don't know if it can be proved. Probably not, but it could be true. It could be true. Yeah, we do have the presence of Hellenism in a much more, let's say, important way in the Bible.
Right.
Not the mentioning, of Alexander and the Macedonian dynasty, not the actual translation of the books, but there are ideas, Greek ideas, philosophical ideas that, find a way into the Bible. For instance, in the so-called wisdom literature I mentioned before, the wisdom of Solomon, for instance, the way wisdom is conceptualized, as the means through which God created the universe, this understanding is very, very Hellenic, especially Stoic. It's the logos, the cosmic logos. So we have around the 3rd century BCE a very strong, influence, impact now of Greek thinking into the Bible. Of course, we had, such influence from other sources, earlier, for instance, from Persia or Sumeria into the Bible. This doesn't mean that the Bible is sort of a cocktail. No, it's influences that, the writers themselves, in a way, take on. They work them through, they elaborate on them, and they make them their own. But that doesn't negate, the fact that, there is an influence there. So, we could even say that as a much more important, fundamental sort of, background of Greek influence in the Bible.
It's interesting you mentioned those influences because, on face value, it seems somewhat unlikely when you consider what ancient Greece is very well known for, whether it's the philosophies or, the democracy and all that sort of thing, that Greece would then adopt this religion that effectively came from the Middle East, from these tribes.
So you're saying why and how did that happen?
How did that happen?
And why?
Exactly, because when the ancient Greeks and the Athenians and all of these people have this civilization all of a sudden that predates Christianity, how compelling must it have been that they took it on in such a way?
Yeah. So basically, you are asking the question: how did the one H, the Hebrew, something coming out of the Hebrew thing, encounter the other H, the Hellenic?
Yes.
And those two H's became,
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, became two.
Yeah. Really.
That's that encounter, that sort of let's call it clash and mixing and syncrasies. That's the biggest thing that has happened in human history, to be honest.
Really?
It is. The last 2,000 years basically shaped and are still being shaped by those two H's coming together. So why did that happen? I mean, it's a very hard question. There's no one answer, in scholarship, if there is even an answer. My way of, thinking of it and conceptualizing it is that Hellenism, through philosophy basically, because the most important part in Hellenism, the most, let's say, powerful, significant in terms of dynamics, part of Hellenism is philosophy. Now, that aspect of Hellenism was basically not to articulate an answer about this or that. How did the universe begin? What is this made of? Or what is the good, or what is the beautiful? What is being just? It was about that, yes. But more importantly, it was keeping always the question open. In this sense, it seems that Hellenic philosophy, in a way, had realized that it was about something that was doomed, that couldn't really be answered. So it was really like a reaching out. Philosophy is always a reaching out. Imagine it as two hands, stretching out for something they cannot grasp.
Wow.
So what happens? At a certain juncture in history, the other H, the Hebrew sort of thing going on its own, for centuries, encounters those two hands. And for a big part of the Hellenic world, the two hands of Hellenism grab and make their own. They embrace what the other H gives as an answer. Not all Hellenes did that, but most of them did it. It took centuries in order to be done. It didn't happen like that. So you have, lots of people saying, that this Jewish sort of thing came and took over Hellenic world and Hellenic worldview by force. As if Christians, because they are referring to Christians, as Christians, fell from the skies, like Aryans, and took over Greece. Yeah. Whereas the truth is that it's the Greeks themselves, the Hellenes, slowly, gradually acknowledging and realizing that what they had been looking for could be given a certain form in this new thing they were coming across, which is the religion of Jesus, the person of Jesus, the message of Jesus. Was it easy? No. It took lots of time in order to come to, let's say, a balance. So you have, great figures like Origen in Alexandria, Egypt, who are the first who really start to tackle the question. Then you have the so-called three hierarchs, Vassilios, Grigorios, Chrysostomos, that put some very, very, very solid foundations. And then you have many other figures until let's say the middle of the 8th, 9th century, where the whole thing is eventually settled. And then and I'm talking about now the mid of the 8th, 9th century in Byzantium, which is the so-called First Byzantine Humanism or Renaissance. And that's when this big enterprise of, Hellenism meeting the Hebrew worldview connected, and they really found a way to move on together.
So how far before that period that you're talking now were the letters to the Philippians, Corinthians,
all those are in the fourth century. Sorry, in the first century.
First century.
Yeah, okay. All the letters in the New Testament, most of them are in the first century. There is perhaps one or two or perhaps three texts that can be dated in the first decades of the second century.
So for those who don't know, these I'm not sure exactly who. I'm sure that a few of those were written by St. Paul.
Yes.
Not all of them.
14 traditionally are ascribed to Paul.
Right.
Yeah. You have, of course, lots of debate on that. For instance, most of the Protestants say that out of those 14, only 7 are really Paul's letters.
Sure.
The others are not. They are from either disciples of Paul or from people that are inspired by the thoughts of Paul.
But who was he speaking to, really? Like, was
the churches. Those are the churches in what we call nowadays Greece. So the next connection with Greece, Christianity in Greece, is that the first churches in Europe are Greek or Greek churches. The Thessalonians, Thessaloniki, Philippi,
Corinthians.
The Corinthians, Athens, where Paul moves in Athens, and he really makes small congregations, and those are the beginnings of the first churches in Europe.
Okay. What about first churches in the world? Were they in and around Israel?
Yeah, those are in what we call nowadays, we used to call Palestine, nowadays Israel. Yeah.
Okay. And then the second lot are all through Greece.
Not only in Greece, but they're also, in Antioch, in Rome, in other places, for instance, Alexandria.
Okay.
But yeah,
Wow.
Paul is the first, and we're talking about around 50 AD. Like 20
this
years,
is very
20
early.
years after Jesus, 20 years after Jesus, we have the first churches in Greece.
Fantastic.
Wow.
We have churches before that
Yeah.
already, in Galilee, for instance,
Yeah.
or Judea, or in Syria, or Egypt. I would dare say, not only, of course, Asia Minor, but also as west as Rome.
Okay.
Yeah, already. How? Most likely by trade and
Sure.
ship.
Okay, but the first ones you reckon were in Greece. First ones in Europe or Greece.
The first ones are in Judea and Galilee.
Okay,
Yeah.
and then after that, first in Europe.
First in Europe, Christianity
was in
as a
Greece.
church, organized church, starts in Greece. We have this information that there were Christians in Rome. For instance, Paul, when he gets to Corinth, he comes to meet a couple, a very famous couple in the New Testament, Aquila and Priscilla,
Yep.
and they come from Rome, and they are already Christians. So this means that Christianity had reached Rome before Paul coming to Greece. But we don't have evidence, solid historical evidence, that there was an organized church there. Perhaps there were some Christians, that found, let's say the fortunes of life had led them there.
Yeah.
So we don't have solid historical evidence that there were organized churches before 50 in Rome, for instance. But we do have, for Greece. The church in Thessaloniki was established in 50 or 51.
Wow.
So is it fair to say that Paul was the first to preach to Greece, or was that someone else? Did that
No,
happen?
Paul is the first. Paul is the first, but he was not the only. After him, others came as well. They were claiming some other emphasis, I would say, on the gospel. They would create lots of problems. Others would be, more of a Peter sort of Christianity. Others are Paul Christianity. Others are Apollo, another person, a Christianity. So you see, there were also, power relationships and, and clashes within Christianity itself, like any religion.
Yeah.
And fierce, sort of clashes. It's famous or perhaps infamous, the clash between Paul and Peter in Antioch.
Oh, right.
Oh, yeah.
What was that about?
It was about, the prerequisites of being a proper Christian. The first Christians were Israelites. Galileans, Judeans, whatever. Those people had circumcision. Very important for them. It was an identity marker. Even Jesus had. So they were saying, if you want to be a Christian, you have to,
Be circumcised.
circumcised. Now, Paul was the first, adamantly, very, very, emphatically saying that this is not going to happen. It's only faith in Jesus. You don't need to be, circumcised. Peter had accepted himself people from the ethnic, Gentiles, without circumscribing. But when he went to Antioch, because there was a real, let's say, strong group of Judeans there, λούφαξε. Yeah, λούφαξε ο Petros. He said, okay, here, we have all these, this is a camp here, this is imagine. But Paul, when he went there, he said to him, what are you doing here?
Yeah.
Are you afraid of these people here? Because they are majority and they might, shut you out from, for instance, any of their, sort of business or company? Haven't we decided, that you are a Christian through faith?
Wow.
Okay.
And where is Antioch? Where is that?
That's in Syria. That's north of it's north of modern Lebanon.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean,
Northeast.
Okay.
you raise a very interesting question, though, and it's a question that many of us have asked, during the course of being Christian. If Jesus was a Jew
and our faith and, is rooted so much in that faith. The question is always, why aren't we Jewish first? Why are we not deemed to be?
Yeah, that's a big question, Yeah, because technically speaking, and academically speaking, if we want to be, really, really accurate, in a way, we would say that Jesus was not a Jew. Of course, we have this famous, dictum that Jesus was a Jew. But, the very famous theologian Wellhausen said Jesus is a Jew. But a Jew was a very specific Israelite in the first century. It was one that was monopolizing the Israel identity and making it equivalent to certain things, like, for instance, adherence to the law, adherence to the temple and its rituals, purity, blah, blah. Now, in many respects, Jesus was against these things. And by the end of the day, he was regarded as a Galilean. Even the Jews, of the day, not what we call Jews nowadays. Yeah. We should not work in what we call historical projectionism, because it's wrong historically. Yeah. What was called a Jew then, or what was emerging as a Jew, that sort of people called Jesus a Galilean. Right. Can anything good come out of Nazareth? A Galilean? Is the Messiah, coming from Galilee? Yeah. Come on.
This Galilean carpenter.
Yeah. It's. But in some other cases, though, we could say that if there is one Jew ever in human history, that's Jesus. Jesus is the Jew. Yeah. But Jesus identifies himself. The only thing that he does, he neither says, I'm a Galilean, or he says, I'm a Jew. He only identifies himself with Israel.
Wow. What was Judas then?
Judas?
Yeah.
We're not quite sure. Judas might have been, a member of a fraction of a revolutionary sort of group. Most likely he was a Galilean. Okay. But he could have been a Judean as well, because it seems that he has some connections. From the Gospels, we understand that Judas has some connections with the Judean establishment in Jerusalem. Right. He moves easily within those circles. Yeah. Perhaps due to his educational connections. We're not quite sure. But Judas Iscariotes, Sicarius, was one with a knife.
Okay.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Wow. So Jesus, he spoke Greek. Is that correct?
Jesus spoke Aramaic.
That was his primary language?
That was his the language he would use, in everyday situations, Aramaic. But he knew Hebrew. Mm-hmm. He would go into the synagogue, into the place of worship and read from the scriptures, which is Hebrew. And as far as I can say, as a scholar, and I think most scholars agree, he would use Greek. He would use some Greek. People knew Greek.
Would he have written
Spasta που λέμε, spasta ελληνικά. Everyone knew in Israel, Palestine those days. Now, most likely he would know Greek. So now, how much of Greek he used? Some say that the discussion between him and Pontius Pilate took place in Greek.
Yes,
perhaps. Although I don't think it's really necessary.
Did he ever leave Israel? Did he end up at Greece at any time, Jesus?
No, never. And he never went to India as well, or Tibet. No.
He didn't go there after his death.
No. Probably.
Well, there's been
all over the place after his death.
I mean, there are so many documentaries on National Geographic that speculates about these things. Where they say, for example, like this is. Where was it? Shangri-La or something like that. This is where he's buried and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, of course. But as historians, we rely on witnesses, historical witnesses. Yeah. Now, we know that Jesus, moved much of his active ministry outside of the limits of Palestine. That's very interesting. For instance, when he meets the Canaanite woman, he's already in what we would call nowadays Lebanon. Why does he move, especially out of Galilee, in the northern parts, out of Galilee? That's an interesting question. He moves out of the limits of Galilee, which is out of the limits of Palestine. Or why does he move, eastwards of Jordan? He selectively moves within Galilee or Judea he is very careful, where he moves around. Now, the most likely answer is that, it might sound a bit, provocative, but that's the real answer. He didn't want to be caught. He was sought after, So imagine a person, really creating a kerfuffle. The first thing you want, if you are, like a person in authority, get rid of him.
Yeah.
So what do? You hit and you run. You hit and you run. So you are there. Okay, you make a big sort of thing, a real kerfuffle, and then you disappear, and you move out of the jurisdiction of the authority. Great. So
makes sense.
He hits in a literal but also metaphorical sense.
Spreads Christianity.
Yeah,
and then
he hits with his message.
Yeah.
He creates, a sort of spiritual awakening and uprising, and then he moves away.
Yeah, okay.
He does that many times. But when he knows that the time has come, then head on, he goes to Jerusalem. And that's the last week of his life. He stops hitting and moving around. We are overplaying. And he goes straight ahead to Jerusalem. That's the only, in the last week of his day, that's the only time we see Jesus going consciously, programmatically to Jerusalem, knowing what's going to happen. He doesn't play around anymore. The critical mass regarding the reaction from the populace is already there. We have done what we needed to do, to create a following. Now we go there. Of course, Jesus knows that, if he goes there with all these, people following him, the people are going to pay severely the cost. So what does he do? He gives his life instead of them. He manages so that all this following is spared, and he's the one that pays the price. Wow. Now this, of course, is one level. This has multiple spiritual levels in theology. But the most basic, surface level is that all these people going with him, and we know from the entrance, Kyraki των Βαΐων.
Yes.
All these people going together with him are going to be slaughtered by the Romans if he doesn't do anything. Because they want him Messiah. They want him, enthroned in Jerusalem. They're going to slaughter them, all of them.
Yeah.
So the only way out is that Jesus gives his life for them instead of theirs. So that's the most basic core sort of point of reference when we think of the theology of sacrifice.
It's interesting that the way that you characterize that last week of his life as well, because when you think of the way that he enters the city, I mean, this is not someone who's looking to lay low,
No, at all.
Right? Entrance into the city, massive public reception, followed by overturning tables in the temple.
Yeah.
Like, these are not the signs of someone who is laying low anymore.
No.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought of it that way before.
Yeah. He's creating consciously.
It's almost like he's daring them to some degree.
Yeah.
I'd never thought of it that way before.
And the only way out is that he offers his life so that
spare everyone else.
Everyone is spared.
Very interesting.
And he got crucified, obviously. Was that a common way to kill people back then? Crucifixion?
For certain crimes, yeah. For instance, treason.
The Romans were very good at
treason, of course.
It was like a slow torture, like a slow death.
Slow death.
And he lasted, 3 days on the cross?
No, 3 hours.
Oh, 3 hours.
3 hours,
which is very quick.
Yeah, very quick. 3 hours. 9 from από ώρας ενάτης έως από ώρας τρίτης έως έκτης, which is 3 hours.
So what time was it, from 3 to 6?
Yeah, I think if I'm correct here, from 9 to 12 or from 12 to 9. It's 3 hours.
So in the morning.
12 to 3.
Yeah.
Before lunch.
I think perhaps it's 12 to 3.
And he got stabbed by a Roman soldier.
Afterwards, pierced.
Just to make sure that
There's not so much. All this is not it's not related to Hellenism, but
yeah, of course.
Yeah.
But it's interesting.
It just came,
This is very interesting stuff.
No, it is.
Yeah.
Wow.
Very good. Well, look, let's go back to the Hellenism,
Yeah.
side of things. I mean,
so he didn't know He didn't ever read Homer or Plato, and he didn't, engage, in comedy or, tragedy.
Okay. And he wasn't Greek.
Yeah.
Okay, tick. All right, but his 12 apostles were definitely all Jewish.
Well,
That we
Yeah,
know.
Galilean.
Sorry. Yep,
Galilean,
correct me.
Judean,
Yep, I
or
did
whatever.
listen. Galilean, got it.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tom.
Israelites.
Israelites. And then after that, the 12, was it the 76?
The
apostles?
70. Yeah, a
Any
broader
of them,
group.
Were any of them Greek?
There seem to be lots who belong to what in those days they would call Hellenes.
Okay.
But meaning what? Meaning
So when I say Greek, I mean Hellenism.
Hellenes, yes.
It's the same thing, isn't it?
Yes, but in those days, you could be called a Hellene without... That didn't mean that you were from Greece, what we call nowadays Greece. It means that you were a bearer of a certain culture, you spoke a certain language, you had a certain consciousness.
Wow,
So the Jews, or the Israelites better,
Yeah.
of the diaspora who spoke Greek, thought like Greeks, they were called Hellenes.
There you
So
go.
a big question is, when the Hellenes come to one of the apostles, and the apostle leads them to Andrew, and Andrew leads them to, says Jesus, look, Lord, we have these Greeks, they have come to see you. And he says there, now it's the time for the Son of Man to be glorified. Now, who are those Greeks? Who are those Hellenes? Are they from Patra, Athena? Or are they Israelites from the diaspora who would have gone, to Jerusalem for the Passover? But they were regarded as Hellenes. In the book of Acts, we have the first clash between, we're talking now 2 years after Jesus.
Yeah.
The first clash in the community in Jerusalem is between the Ιουδαίοι and the Hellenistes. Οι Εβραίοι και οι Ελληνιστές. Εβραίοι και οι Ελληνιστές. Who are those Hellenistes? They are, the Hellenizers. Those who, were part of the Hellenic culture. So Israelites, ethnically, but not culturally and linguistically or whatever. Again, you have the Hellenic, permeating as a cultural, as a linguistic feature,
And
aspect.
how long have they been there? Were they part of Alexander the Great's?
With Alexander the Great and the empire he established, Hellenism becomes more and more and more part of the entire Middle East.
Because all that area got Hellenized, what was it, 300 BC?
Yeah, 3rd century.
Yeah, and Cleopatra was there till, 90 BC or something like that?
Yeah. Cleopatra, was there in Egypt.
Yeah.
So
It's filling up.
Yamas. Yamas.
Jeez, mate, this is good. Good chat,
Fantastic.
boys. I love all this stuff.
This is the best conversation we've had on this.
Okay.
Finally.
So-
So we can tick some boxes now.
Absolutely.
So when we talk about Hellenism, we should, all those listening, should just disassociate from the ethnic understanding. In those days, a Hellene is someone who speaks Greek, who behaves and thinks like a Greek.
But they weren't physically necessarily born in Greece.
No.
Got it.
No.
But someone born in Greece was an Hellenas.
Someone born in Greece might call himself an Hellenes as well, but they were not more Hellenes than others.
But what you said there was a difference. The Hellenes and the...
The Evrei, those in Jerusalem, we have Christians who are they are Evrei,
Yeah.
they are Hebrews, and then we have Christians that are Hellenes, which are Israelites from the diaspora, talking Greek and behaving like Greeks. And for some reason they found their way to Jerusalem and they stayed there because they became part of the first church.
Yeah.
But because they think differently, the Greek mindset and the Hellenic and the Hebrew, for the first time, clash because they think differently.
Yeah, true.
Okay.
So, all right, so then we've got the 70 apostles. Some of those
Yeah.
may have been
I think most of them were part of the diaspora, the Israelite diaspora.
Okay.
Yeah, even if you see their names, traditionally their names are Aristarchos.
Okay, it's
That's
Greek.
very Greek, right?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Classic.
Mark, for instance, Mark is regarded as one of them, and he is regarded as Marcos Ioannis.
Pretty Greek.
Yeah, Ioannis is not Greek.
Isn't it?
Yeah, but Marcos is Roman. That being said, the Greco-Roman feature here.
So what's Ioannis then? Is that...
Yohanan.
Right.
It's Yeah, the most Greek names are not Greek. Ioannis is not Greek. Maria, half of the population doesn't have a Greek name.
Yeah.
I mean,
So
it has
Maria
been
is Galilean.
Miriam.
Oh,
Miriam. Yeah, it's an Israelite name. It's a Hebrew name.
yeah.
I mean, they have been Hellenized in the sense that we know them. Maria.
Yeah.
Okay, Ioannis or Iakovos.
What about Nick? Is that Greek?
Nicholas is Greek.
Okay.
Yeah,
Good.
yeah.
Just checking.
Yeah, very Greek.
What about my name, mate?
Yeah.
Mine's definitely Christian.
Anastasios?
Anastasios. No, it's not. It's Christian, but it's Greek.
Yes, there you
Yeah.
go.
So, all right. I didn't know. Yeah, no, a few Johns out there.
Yeah.
So you're not Greek.
Yeah. Sorry,
No,
boys.
they
Hand in your Greek pass.
have. So you see how how those two H's have created a new thing.
Yeah.
I can't help but think that's just thrown me off. The two H's.
Yeah.
Has a book been written by that title?
No, it hasn't.
You should write it.
Yeah. The two H's. Yeah.
Man, that is
Absolutely.
brilliant. Oh, that's a podcast in itself.
That's brought on a whole new perspective for me personally.
Yeah, me too.
Honestly.
Definitely. And the way you just described it as well. Should we talk about who was the guy at Revelation?
Ioannis.
Yes. We were just talking about Ioannis.
Yeah,
So
Ioannis.
John, Ioannis.
Yeah.
So he wrote the Revelation in the cave in Kos.
No, Patmos.
Oh, Patmos.
Patmos, yes.
And I've been there, yes.
Yeah, Patmos. One of the, let's say, most important pilgrimages in Greece.
Yes.
Yeah, Patmos. The monastery there is from, if I'm correct, from the 11th century.
Wow.
It's a Comnenian monastery.
Because the cave is still there. They've got the monastery above it.
Well, just on that point, there's a very interesting parallel between the story of him writing that book. Mm-hmm. I'm just making the connection. I haven't read up on it or anything. I may be completely wrong. But there seems to me to be an interesting parallel between how he wrote the book of Revelations and how Muhammad is said to have written or been dictated to the Quran. Is there any connection between the two from a scholarly perspective?
There is a connection. There is a similarity in terms of, that both texts are regarded as God-inspired.
Or dictated, let's
say. In the case of Muhammad, it's the actual words. Jibril, which is, Gabriel, says the words, the actual words. That's why, in Islam, when it comes to the Quran, the words are not to be tampered with. Don't touch the words. That's the words that came out of the mouth of Archangel Jibril. Now, in the case of course, God-inspired books in the Bible or for instance, the Revelation, the inspiration is regarded in a more general sense as, God in a way guiding or illuminating the intellect of a person.
Yes.
And in a way facilitating the certain ideas which are related to his own experiences. That's why the books never cease to have, the features of one's personality.
Interesting. For those who maybe don't know the story, what is tell us briefly what the story of John writing the book of Revelation.
The Revelation is a book that belongs to a certain genre, which is called revelatory literature, and in this type of literature, you have Jesus, or perhaps Virgin Mary, or an angel, revealing to a group of people or to an individual certain answers, for instance, to questions, or what is going to happen in the future, or giving specific guidelines in order to behave in this or that way. In the case of the Revelation of John, we have Jesus himself revealing to John, his disciple, what is going to happen in the end of days. So that's the end of history, the end of time. Now, time and the end of time for God is quite different from what it is for us. I mean, we think of the end of something as something very, very specific. If something has a time span of, let's say, 100 years, the end of it would be the last year or the last 2-3 years. Now, those 2-3 years for God might be three millennia. God is not subject to,
outside of time.
the understanding of we have about time. So in Christian theology, when we talk about the end times, we talk about the times starting with Jesus. So with Jesus and after Jesus, all the period is regarded as end times.
Right.
So the revelation that Jesus gives to John relates to the period that he inaugurated. It's not about a period that, look, is gonna start sometime in the future. It's already started. And it's gonna repeat itself in the same manner. So what you see there in terms of this or that plague, is an aspect that is to be repeated, because we live in the same condition. We haven't changed. Perhaps the book is against, the emperor of Rome, and it is. Rome is the Babylon,
Yes.
the great whore, as it is called. It's a very, very provocative book. In some sense, I would call it anarchist.
Yeah.
It's very revolutionary. It's against authority. It's against the empire. It's against the condition of human living as we know it in history, for the sake of something different.
It's a very different book.
Yeah,
to the
it's
rest
a
of the
it's a
collection.
very it's a very sort of militant sometimes book. Now, being against the Roman Empire doesn't mean that it's only against the Roman Empire. It can be against any empire. It can be against any state that absolutizes itself, because the condition is the same. The book had a very, very strange sort of reception. To return to the question we were discussing about the Bible, is it part of the Bible or not? For many centuries, it wasn't in the Bible.
Well, stylistically, you could very easily leave it out.
I mean, it's the only book that belongs to the genre of apocalypse, and it's not even read, in the church. Never in the
right.
never.
So the Revelation is never
read.
Wow.
There's no reading, liturgical reading in the Orthodox Church that comes from Revelation.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Because the book is simply, in some senses, very provocative, very, can be very touchy, and the other sense, it's, how do you interpret it? It's, it can be very, difficult and messy sometimes, but it has been incorporated. For instance, there's lots of churches or lots of monasteries, especially in Mount Athos, that have the apocalypse depicted as iconography. So although not read, it's there.
Yeah.
Present in its absence. The same way the Protevangelion of Iakovos about Virgin Mary. Never in the canon, but in the church. Present in its absence. The only church I know of that has a liturgical use of the Revelation is the Coptic Church. The Coptic Orthodox Church uses the Book of Revelation, especially in the Lent leading to Pascha. And I think, if I'm not wrong, that it's used in the high Anglican Church, Church of England, during the...
That wouldn't surprise me.
matrimony.
Oh, really?
Yeah, matrimony.
That's an interesting place for it.
Because it's about, it's about the church, and the union of the church in Christ. And that's a typos, a type, an image of the union between men and women.
I'm trying to recall whether I went to a Catholic school, went through the whole Catholic system. I can't remember them actually. I'm pretty sure they may have done readings from Revelation in that during the Mass. I'm not sure.
Perhaps, yeah.
Okay. Can we talk about the schism that happened in?
There's lots of schisms. Which one? The big one.
The
great schism. The schism.
The schism.
Yeah, 1054.
1054. So that was when the Byzantine Empire sort of split. You got Catholics on the west, Orthodox on the right. Is that?
Yeah, we have this split, which is...
so why did they split first?
It's a development that happened after a prolonged period of lots of developments. So there's lots there in terms of politics, ideological differences, cultural differences. The two parts of the let's call it the empire were just drifting apart for centuries. When the Christians of the East decided to put into the creed a certain theological understanding, which the Eastern Christians knew about, which is the filioque, that the Holy Spirit proceeds from the Father and the Son. Now, they knew about it. The Eastern theologians knew about it, the fathers, and they were sort of, reserved and okay, just keep it as a thing, let's say a meditation, a reflection. It's okay, you mean something. We haven't got that sort of understanding here. But once it got into the creed and you made it into an article of faith, that in a way was a dynamite for all the fuel being there, politically, economically, culturally, difference, to explode. Because many a time there's scholars who say that the causes were not religious. That's a tricky thing. Now, there's lots of, let's say, accumulated tension. But that tension is not the cause. That tension is the fuel that simply makes the whole process more powerful. The real cause is the difference in faith, which in a way just makes all the tension explode. So we shouldn't confuse things. I'm just using this image so I make it easier for the people to understand it. Yeah. That's the big problem for us. And in many respects, there are Orthodox theologians today who say that if you take out the filioque from the creed, things are going to be very, very easy. Very, very easy.
So what's the creed? The Bible?
The creed.
Nicene Creed.
The Nicene Creed. Nicene and Constantinople. It's the two ecumenical councils, the first and the second, who made the Pistevo, which we recite every Sunday in church. So it's the basic declaration of faith.
Yes.
Okay. So you messed with that. So take it out. If you take it out, then there's a way to coexist, because we say we confess the same thing. Now some say that the basic issue is not that, and that the Roman Catholic Church
just to be clear, they added something into it. So the East Orthodox
added this expression filioque in Latin, which means και εκ του Υιού in Greek.
Okay.
Και στο πνεύμα το Άγιον.
Yep.
Έτσι.
So
το εκ του πατρός εκπορευόμενον, we say. Mm-hmm. They say το εκ του πατρός και του Υιού.
Okay.
Filioque.
Okay.
So take it out. Now, there's lots of people saying that the Roman Catholics don't have a problem taking it out. So most likely they don't.
Hang on, did the Roman
But how do you take out the Pope?
Okay.
The real issue, they say, is not the filioque now, but the Pope.
Okay.
The place of the Pope, the way that the Pope functions in the church. It's like you have the church and the Pope. You don't have the Pope in the church, but as if you have the church and the Pope. We in the East, Orthodox Christians, wouldn't have a problem, to have the Pope as the first see, because he was the first see. Constantinople was the second see. The first see in a council. So because, in a council, someone has to, someone has to call the council. How are you going to call? Yeah. Anyone could just say, we're going to have a council? No. That would be, the first. Who's the first? The Pope.
The Pope. Then
he's the one who has the prerogative to call the council. And he presides. And as a president, he has a certain, some rights that, give him some sort of, advantage as a president. Yeah. All this is okay. That happens in every human endeavor that follows, let's say, a democratic order. But what happens when you don't have a council and you just have the Pope declaring to all others that something is true or might not be true or could be true or whatever? The issue of papacy, as we call, of the place of the Pope, the authority, the way we understand the authority of the Pope is now the big issue. And I don't know how we can go about or by this, really. I'm one of those who I'm against the union between Christians.
Right.
Yeah, because we don't need to be, united. I mean, it's good to have the Roman Catholic Church. It's good to have the Greek Orthodox Church. Different churches.
Yeah,
we can be, really, respecting and mutually, loving one another and working together. But we don't need to unite, because to be honest, how can you unite when for the last 1 millennium you belong to a different history?
Yeah.
Union, true union between, not religions, but simple people, everyday people. I'll give you an example. I came from Greece, after being raised in Greece, 26 years, and I came to Australia for the first time. Okay, I'm absent from Australia 26 years. People of my age have lived their lives here. in those years have, have a trajectory.
Yeah.
Have, an understanding of the place. I come here and suddenly I find myself a stranger. I reach out, I try, and everyone else is good to me.
Yeah.
But I cannot connect.
Yeah.
Because people have already...
But even just the other big things, like even our christenings, for example, how traditional are our christenings to what it was, 2,000 years ago?
Well, we do immersion, whereas the Catholics don't. It's more of a
so
symbolic
Catholics
thing.
are very modernized. So when we spread oil all over the...
There are lots of differences in that respect, but
we're still very traditional, aren't we?
Yes, but
how it was done 1,000, 2,000 years ago.
We shouldn't, look into, I would dare say, petty things. The tradition is something changing, something alive.
Yeah.
Tradition is something alive. You can, make something out of it new.
Yeah.
Because it's there to cater for the needs.
Yeah.
So it's not a big deal, if you're gonna do the baptism that way or that way in terms of watering. Yeah. The issue in baptism is in the name of whom do you baptize? Do you baptize in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit?
Yeah.
Or do you baptize in the name of Jesus? We have, Protestant groups. I baptize you in the name of Jesus. That's not a baptism. Because the formula has been, traditionally, in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Now, if it's going to be immersion in a lake, in a river, or in a colivitra, and if the water is going to go over all inches of your head or not, that's a petty thing.
Yeah.
I think so.
Sure.
Yeah. So there are lots of such issues, but the big issue is the ecclesiological issue, the issue of authority in the church. What is the church? And here, the question of the Pope is cardinal. Is the Pope under the church or over against the church?
Well, to that point, right up against that point, really. Does the Catholic Church and the Greek Orthodox Church or the Eastern Orthodox Church, do they regard each other as heretics? Have they both excommunicated each other? Is that still the way they look at each other?
I understand, Tasha, what you're saying. I'm not one of those who like the term heretic. Nowadays, I think that sort of language is obsolete. It did serve a purpose, but I don't think that the situations now are the same. We are different. We belong to different histories. We represent different experiences. But I wouldn't call them heretics. Personally, I wouldn't. But at the same time, I can't see us uniting because we are different. And it's nice. It's wonderful to be different and to be able, to cherish your difference. I think so. Even in Christianity.
Well, what is the relationship between the two?
Now, there are groups who regard them as not just heretics, but they're arch heretics.
Yes.
There are groups who say that, no, they're not heretics. There are groups, and especially scholars, who say that there's no ecumenical council that has, excommunicated or declared heretics the Roman Catholics, and blah, 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 blah. But, of course, we have a long literature, during the millennium that has, passed, and we have texts that refer to them as heretics, and official texts.
Yes.
Now, is that tradition? Yes and no. The church is the authority of itself. It's not this or that text that is going to dictate to the church that what it should follow. Yeah. Perhaps I should make this clearer. There might be ecclesiastical documents, official documents that say a certain thing. Now, 3, 4, 5 centuries afterwards, the church might, say, look, we said that then, but now we say something different.
Yeah.
Because it does not pertain to the faith, but to the way we interacted with a problem. And you don't interact in the same way with a problem. You interact differently. Yeah. So we call the Roman Catholics, during the Ottoman period, we call them heretics. What does that mean? That we have to call them heretics till the second coming? Yeah. No. It's a jargon. It was a rhetoric of the days. It was the way people express themselves. Yeah. We shouldn't stick to those things because they are not the tradition of the church. And I think it's a quite Greek thing. to be flexible in terms of thinking.
Yeah.
Greeks were always flexible thinkers.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just think back to, I think it was 1998. I remember I was in Greece. It was either 98 or 2000. I'm pretty sure it was 98. And the Pope was visiting Greece.
Yes.
For some reason.
I think it was 200.
Yeah, and it
2000.
was...
Sorry, 2000.
I can't remember for the life of me, but I will never forget this woman in Greece waiting for him at the airport who was dead against him even coming.
Yeah.
And I think the quote was, could be wrong, the Pope is a killer.
Yeah.
Like there are people with very, very strong views about this.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah. Very, very strong. And people that, just go bazookas, like the Pope is the Satan incarnate, like sort of, rubbish. I remember when the Pope came to Greece, because I was in Greece at the time, and I actually was speaking about, that visit on TV and radio,
Yes.
being invited for interviews. And it was Christodoulos. Christodoulos was the Archbishop of the day. And... for his, it should be credit to him that he accepted, the visit to take place. Although we know Christodoulos was quite a strong person in terms of his views.
Yes.
Roman Catholics brothers are not heretics.
Well,
By the way, for instance, let's be real, how many Greeks send their children to Roman Catholic schools?
A lot.
Half of the students in Roman Catholic schools, I'm exaggerating now, but it's for a reason, half of the students are Greeks.
Well, I was one of them.
Yeah, my children are.
Yeah.
So
but you don't send them for the religion thing. It's just a good school, I'm assuming.
Yes, it is, but I am sending them for the religion as well, because they offer a kind of, for the religion in broader sense, not for the faith, the Roman Catholic faith, but for the sense of a perspective in life, of
That's
an
very
ethos,
important.
of an understanding of a different sort of stance. Again, in terms of value.
That's what's lacking in the education in Greece.
Yes, absolutely.
Because when you're in Greece and you talk about these subjects with people, say, of my age, you get the distinct feeling that there are blinkers on. The only thing that exists is us, and there's nothing else around it. At least that's been my experience. The one thing that I will say for having had a Catholic education growing up is that it opened that door to say, well, we are one of many. This is my tradition, that's yours, that's fine, but we're not the only ones. Which I think is important.
And the point is that one knows what they are and what they stand for.
Exactly.
And they respect the other. I used to say that, I'm a very ecumenical Christian because I'm Greek Orthodox. My children, go to a Roman Catholic school, and in my car, I always listen to Hope. Hope is a Protestant, Pentecostal, evangelical radio station. The most famous in Sydney. So
it's a mix.
It's a mix. Why not? Why not?
Open thinker.
Yeah, why not?
There's something to be learned from everything.
Yeah,
It's
but
all
I
relevant.
would never, confuse the issues of faith. That's our faith.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
But wouldn't I respect, Saint Francis of Assisi? Who wouldn't respect Saint Francis of Assisi? Come on.
I want to ask a general question that's kind of a little bit off topic, but the significance of Hagia Sophia, for those who maybe don't understand, what is the significance of that building and the symbolism of that place?
The two H's together. That's it.
It just keeps coming back to that.
That's the two H's together in architectural, artistic terms.
Wow.
You have something very Greek there, but at the same time so Oriental. The Hellenic and the Hebrew, and via the Hebrew the Eastern part thing, have come together, in Hagia Sophia. Perhaps I'm not the best person to ask about this because I've never been to Constantinople. I've never been to Hagia Sophia. So,
I have.
Yeah,
Have you been, Nick?
Yeah, I have.
So you have a a feeling. You have a real sort of somatic picture of it.
It's very strange, isn't it? It was surreal being in that building. And there were a lot of. This was before it had, it was changed back into a mosque more recently, and it was a museum at the time. But there were so many people in that building in that building at the time, but it was unbelievable.
Yeah, I want to go back because I went with an Irish backpacker, and he wouldn't shut up. He just kept on. I wanted to actually take it in. I wanted to shut my eyes, get the feel of it, look around, the detail. But this guy wouldn't shut up. And there's people everywhere. I go, mate, I just want to take it in. I want to absorb. So I've read a lot about it and so forth. So that's why I want to go back. But I did take it in. And I was amazed how high and open it was.
Yeah.
I can imagine when the Byzantine chanting would start, how beautiful it would have sounded in there.
Well, on that point, I think it was a couple of years ago now, there was a group of
American scholars, they have
audiologists or something like that went in and ran a test by popping a balloon in the center of the church. They placed microphones around the place. They popped the balloon in the center. They recorded what it sounded like, and from that, they were able to create a filter that you could then apply to something like what we're recording in right now.
Or Byzantine music, and listen how it would listen.
Exactly.
How it would
so that
sound.
was the catalyst to create the filter that they then applied to Byzantine chant. And
it's amazing. It's amazing.
This is what it would have sounded like to hear this in Hagia Sophia. It was next level.
Yeah, that would have been
unbelievable
goosebump stuff.
Oh yeah. Brilliant stuff.
Yeah, it's very eerie.
Yeah.
But since we're talking about Hellenism, we should note that one of the most Hellenic depictions in Byzantine art is in Hagia Sophia. The mosaic of the Virgin Mary you see in the church in the apsida is the most Hellenic mosaic we have from the entire history of Byzantine art.
Wow.
It's basically the Christian appropriation, transformation, and reinvention of the seated female goddess figure of ancient Greece. So you have these statues with the goddesses, sitting or standing.
Yep.
And basically, this is a sculpture, and basically that was turned into 2-dimension on the mosaic and turned into an icon. It's amazing how the Christian experience managed to take a polytheistic, a pagan experience, wasn't afraid of it, and make out of it the best for the most sacred place you could imagine. So it's polytheism turned monotheism.
Yes.
And being at the same time itself. It's amazing. Wow. It's amazing.
Beautiful. Well said. Just one last thing. Mount Athos.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you get the feel there's a bit of a disconnect now with Mount Athos and the rest of the Greek Orthodox community? Like, for example, the US priest that came out and tried to go, I read in the paper recently that he christened... The Archbishop christened...
Elpidophoros.
Yeah. And they barred him from allowing to go to Mount Athos.
Yeah.
Do you think there's a bit of a divide now with Christianity and Greek Orthodox and the Vatican? The Patriarch. The Patriarch, yeah. Because Mount Athos is very traditional. They're not changing anything.
Yeah, Orthodoxy, the last, let's say, 10 years, is going through a crisis on many levels. At the same time, we have developments, very promising developments, and that's the good thing with crises. But it is a crisis. We see that, in the 2016 synod in Crete, and how certain churches, big churches, didn't be part of it. We have seen it, in the war in Ukraine. Generally, the global geopolitical power relations and how the ecumenical patriarchate maneuvers within that space. So it's a very complicated issue. I think that Mount Athos has kept their own balanced sort of position there. Perhaps things might get nastier. Yeah. I don't think with the patriarchate, but we don't know how things are going to develop in Greece with the Church of Greece after the passing of the recent law concerning same-sex marriage. It seems that the church and the state are going for a head-on crash. It's something that most of us knew that would happen at some point. Times have changed.
Yeah.
It seems that this law has been the catalyst. Now, what's going to come out of it, and if it's going to be for the benefit of Greek society as such, That's a big question. Besides, when we talk about Greek society, we don't know really what we're talking anymore, because it's not the traditional Greek society we know. I mean, Greece has changed a lot. It's much more multicultural and ethnic than what we believe or imagine. So I mean, we just have to wait and see how the clash, because there's going to be a clash between the Church of Greece and the state.
Yeah.
How big that is, how it's going to be sort of negotiated, and how Mount Athos is going to react. Because Mount Athos, as you know, is something different from the Church of Greece. It doesn't belong to the Church of Greece. It has an autodiikito, which is an autonomy, and it refers spiritually directly to the Patriarchate. But it's within Greece. So it's a bit dodgy as a situation, anyhow.
It's interesting as well, because as most people would have read by now, following the legislation that came in, the vote that came in regarding same-sex marriage in Greece, Metropolitan of Piraeus, Seraphim, reacted by calling a synod and promptly excommunicated all the politicians that voted yes.
For. Yeah. But he's not the only one.
Yes. So
the Metropolitan in Kythera did the same.
Right.
And the Metropolitan in Kerkyra did the same.
Right.
So there's going to be sort of a wave of metropolitans, joining up forces and having their own way of dealing with the issue. Because it seems that Hieronymus doesn't want to have the synod coming out a plan of action, which everyone would have to follow. Perhaps he's a bit cautious as to what such a plan of action would be if he would go for, a vote. So he has left the space open, and in such a space, every metropolitan has the flexibility to do things the way he thinks best.
So to that point, is that something that the Patriarch could step in and say, this is right or this is wrong?
No, he couldn't. In terms of canon law, he couldn't. He could, give his advice. They could ask him, how to deal with it, but not officially.
Right.
Yeah. Because he cannot intervene into an autocephalous church in such a way. But people go to the Patriarch. Metropolitans of Greece go there and they talk. They talk between themselves. So in that sort of sense, he could give some sort of advice. But I hope that, as we say in Greek, nane chamili toni. I don't think that, having any sort of, how can you say, campaigns. Like, we shouldn't make it into a cultural war, sort of thing. The church has its own tradition, has its own life, has its own values. If someone doesn't want to follow them, okay, you don't want to follow them. Now, if that means that, the church and the state have to, at a certain point, start dividing their things and their common endeavors, let it be. Perhaps it's for the best.
Very interesting. Well, turbulent times.
Turbulent, Interesting times.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Well, it will be very interesting to follow what happens from
here. How that pans out,
This has been a fantastic discussion. And there's so much more that we genuinely could be talking about. I think
it was due to the Chikulia.
Yeah,
it was.
Well, it's only a quarter of a bottle gone. Usually we go. Well, that's not true anymore. We're quite reserved now.
Okay.
When this podcast first started, this whole bottle would be gone.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it sounded like the whole bottle went. We'd be gibbering and the questions would be silly.
Yeah.
I'm feeling it a bit now, actually.
It's a good one.
It's actually hit me. Yeah, this is good though.
We should have had Comandaria for this episode.
What's that?
Sacramental wine.
Oh, okay.
Mavrodafni.
Yes, Mavrodafni.
Yeah, or Samniotico, the Samos wine, the very sweet one.
Ah, beautiful.
Yeah, very good one.
Oh, Mavrodafni from your part, isn't it?
Yeah. Even better.
Yeah.
Classic.
Beautiful. We're going to have to bring you back at some point.
Yeah,
definitely.
Because there's a whole list of questions here that we that we haven't touched on.
Only got through half, I think.
Yeah. So episode 2, we'll bring you back, and we'll have to, we bring a friend maybe.
Yeah.
2.0.
Yeah. I'll bring a friend along.
That's right.
Classic.
So let's say this is one, and we we will have a second
A second coming.
Second coming. Our sequel. Second round.
That's right.
Exactly. And look, if
Thanks for
there's
having me, guys.
Oh, no, thank you. Look, if there's any listeners out there who want to ask some questions to Vassili, please reach out to us, because I'm sure that would have raised a lot of questions for a lot of people.
I'm sure we're going to receive mail about this, and let's just say keep it civil.
Yeah, and it's always it's always my personal opinion.
Yes.
Yeah. It's not though an arbitrary opinion, because anyone thinks that they have an opinion. Yeah. But it's an opinion, or it's informed. Because I'm dealing with these sort of things my whole life, decades of study. Yeah. So I'm trying, of course, to say what I believe, but not in an arbitrary way. Not just spreading around, things that come to my head.
Absolutely.
And like I said, you're well read. You're well researched. And like I said, I think you could have gone on with one question we've asked. You could have gone for an hour, but we had to cut you off. So I'm sure.
Thank you for that.
No, I'm just saying. So
that's
people
good,
ask
that's
questions.
good.
It might be taken out of context as well. So, but anyway, look, we'd love to hear all your responses out there. Anyone who listens, and I'm sure we're going to have a lot of questions, Tom. So we'll be busy.
Definitely
Reaching out to Vassili. Hey, Vassili, how do we answer this?
Well, Vassili, thank you so much for being on Ouzo Talk. Really appreciate it. OuzoTalk@outlook.com is the email. Follow us on social media @Ouzo Talk and @Ouzo_talk on Instagram. Nika Thanasiou, mate. Thank you very much.
Bravo, Tom. Thank you. Thank you, Vassili. Thanks, everyone.
See you later.
Ακολουθήστε μας στο Soundees, στο Spotify, στο Apple Podcasts και στο Google Podcasts.